housing data, mortgage industry data, economic data, and you really can get lost in the wash with all of that.
And I don't have 4 hours to watch the news.
You don't want to be the lender making a loan on a property that is going to be worth 5% less next month than it was the month you issued the loan. There is just a wealth of free information available online these days.
People don't care what you know until they know how much you care.
Go do a Google search for your state or your metropolitan area economic trends, and you'll be surprised what you find.
Hello and welcome back to AD Mortgage Insights. Our goal at Insights is to provide loan originators with useful information, tools, and skills that they can apply to maximize their success. I'm Jerry Byers, Senior Content Manager for AD Mortgage. Have you ever felt overloaded with economic and financial data in the news? Jobs reports here, GDP figures there, and throw in the constant updates about the Federal Reserve doing this or that? It can be a bit daunting trying to figure out what is important for a loan originator. Well, today we have a guest, great one for you. His name is Rick Sharga from the C.J. Patrick Company, and he's a nationally recognized economic and finance expert, especially in the housing sphere. Rick is a good friend of AD Mortgage, and we collaborate regularly. If you recognize his name, it's probably because he's been featured on major news networks and quoted extensively in the media. I asked Rick to join us today in hopes of eliminating all the noise and getting down to the financial data that really matters to brokers and loan officers alike. He does a great job of explaining the data in terms non-economists can understand and utilize. So let's get started.
Hey folks, as I mentioned, here's Rick Sharga. Rick, great to see you. Always a pleasure. I really appreciate all the work that you do with us with AD. You're certainly a friend of the company, and you provide some fantastic insights on what things we should be looking at, what things we should notice that are happening in the economy, and especially with our industry. And because we talked about this so much, I really just was excited to be able to get you on here so you could explain to some of our partners, what types of things they need to look for, because it can be information overload if you're watching the news, and I don't have 4 hours to watch the news. Fortunately, I have an economics background. I have a good idea of what things I should be looking at. But for a lot of folks, it's just, well, so that's great. Unemployment's, dropping, or it's going up, or, when this new jobs report, well, where was the old jobs report or whatnot? People just don't know exactly which things to target with their time, and time's super valuable, especially to our partners, because they want to be out there generating leads and they want to sound informed, but they don't have time to, do deep dives. So yeah, if you could just get us started, talk a little bit about what you do and what things you think are really important. That would be super helpful for me and for our audience.
Yeah, Jerry, I appreciate the opportunity. It's always good talking to you. My little firm really focuses on market intelligence, business intelligence. So sometimes it's hard for me to do what you're talking about doing, because I'm neck deep in data all the time. Housing data, mortgage industry data, economic data, and you really can get lost in the wash with all of that stuff coming at you and being updated every day, and then trying to figure out which data is legitimate versus which is hype, and that stuff too. But I try and simplify things in a lot of different ways, and assuming that the folks who are joining us today are mostly focused on the residential market. I think it's safe to look at maybe 4 or 5 different things that you want to kind of hone in on in your local markets. And I'm emphasizing that because a lot of what you and I talk about very often are national numbers. And while those are useful from a trends perspective, is the market growing or contracting, they're not always all that helpful in a local market basis. And just as a quick example, if you look at home prices in the Northeast and Midwest are still going up 3, 4, 5, 6% year over year. If you look at the South, the Southeast, parts of the Pacific Coast and the Pacific Northwest, there are markets where they're actually seeing prices decline on a year over year basis. So that national average, which is about a 1.2% year over year increase, is nice to know, but it's relatively meaningless depending on your local market. So from a housing market perspective, I think three things really you want to be looking at are the home sales volume. Are home sales going up or going down in your particular market? You want to be looking at pricing trends. Are prices up, flat, or down year over year? And I don't spend a lot of time looking at month over month. I tend to look at year over year data for that because there's a lot of volatility month over month, and there are some seasonal trends. So if you were looking at December prices, for example, versus November, those prices almost always go down. And it's not a trend, it just happens to be that time of year. But you look at those two things, and you also look at inventory, days of supply in the market, because that by itself will give you some things to think about. If you see supply growing, um, once you get over about a 4 month supply of homes for sale, and that basically is determined by the number of homes for sale, kind of divided by the sales throughput, how many properties are selling, how quickly. Once you're over a 4 month supply, you shift away from a market that favors sellers into more neutral territory. From about 4 month supply to 6 month supply, you're in that kind of equilibrium, and then over 6 month supply, you wind up in more of a buyer's market. Nationally, we're kind of in neutral territory right now, and that's a big shift because for the last several years we've been in one of the strongest sellers markets in history. A seller's market is limited supply, prices going up very quickly, properties selling very quickly. A buyer's market tends to be more supply than demand, prices flat or declining and taking longer to sell properties. So really important if you're making loans in your market to know which way things are going. You don't want to be the lender um, making a loan on a property that is going to be worth 5% less next month than it was the month you issued the loan. So those housing trends are important to look at. And they're a slightly more granular level of detail than say economic trends, which we can talk about as well.
Well, and let me just follow up real quick. So, on my national news, I get the national numbers all the time. Where can I find, what are good sources for a guy like me who doesn't have a bunch of, paid subscriptions to
Yep.
paywall type sources? Where could I find some decent, fairly accurate numbers on my local market as far as those, time on the market numbers, the average price? What would you consider some good sources for that?
Well, I got to tell you, I'm in some ways I'm a penny pincher, so I'm not sure I could have run this business the way I do today if I'd had to do it 10 years ago, because there is just a wealth of free information available online these days. I would point people to Zillow, which
Okay.
has a ton of free information. Zillow Research is a separate part of Zillow. You can do a Google search for Zillow Research and get right to that data. But even if you're looking at local markets, there's a ton of information available for free along the lines of what we're talking about. Realtor.com. If you go to Realtor.com research again, they have both national and local market sales trends. They break down market momentum in various markets, what prices are doing, inventory, all days on market, the whole nine yards. I look at those two sources as kind of go-tos. But and here's a little secret tip for your folks. Most realtor associations publish this data as well, and they'll make it available for free. So take a look at if you're in Illinois, just do a search for Illinois Association of Realtors. If you're in California, you do the same thing, whatever state you're in. And in some larger markets, for example, Miami, closer to where you guys are. The Miami Association of Realtors publishes a wealth of information as well. So you can get a lot of that local market information online for free from these publicly available sources. And that's where I find a lot of my information.
Okay, cool. So now, when I start hearing about jobs data, for instance, or I start listening to folks talk about dollar value and inflation numbers and what the Fed's going to do, again, a lot of times, and only because, well, I have a little bit of a background in this, I realize that a lot of this is just fluff and it really isn't substantial. It's really just, I don't know if it's airtime filler or if it's just them throwing out things to toss, the market into a little bit of chaos or I have no idea why it's out there, but it's not really valid. Are there things regarding those types of things? Rates are of huge importance to our partners, for instance, and we hear about the Fed cut or a potential Fed cut and whatnot. What types of things in that area where interest rates can be impacted, would you suggest that we keep an eye on, or at least an ear out for?
Yeah, I'm probably going to upset some people when I say this, but I, I would suggest not paying a lot of attention to that stuff. It's important to keep an eye on mortgage rates. That's for sure. I'm a regular visitor to Mortgage News Daily. It's a publication in the industry, and they publish daily updates on mortgage rates, 30-year, 15-year arms, and so forth and so on. And that's a good barometer. And if you see things that are trending down, gives you a reason to reach out to your database and say, hey, if you're thinking about buying, if you're thinking about a refi, now's probably a good time to take a look and maybe lock in. So I do look at mortgage rates. I think we got obsessed watching the Federal Reserve over the last couple of years. Um, and it became kind of a running joke. Let's wait for the Federal Reserve to cut rates so mortgage rates will go down. And every time they cut the Fed funds rate, mortgage rates went up. It's a reminder that there's no direct correlation between the Fed funds rate and mortgage rates. The Fed kind of sets the overall lending environment, the overall credit environment, but they're talking about overnight rates that the lenders basically get to play with. Has nothing to do with longer term credit rates. And in fact, if you want to guess where mortgage rates are going, you follow the bonds market. What you'll look at is 10-year US Treasuries, and you look at the yields. And again, you find this information everywhere. CNBC has a markets section on their website, and they have all this stuff listed every day. Um, and take a look at the yields on the 10-year US Treasuries and add 1.5 to 2 points to those yields. And that's where mortgage rates historically have fallen. If people hear economists talking about the spread, that's the difference between those yields on 10-year US Treasury bonds and 30-year fixed rate mortgages. So the spread's usually 1.5 to 2 points. A 4% bond yield equals a mortgage rate of 5.5 or 6%. Again, historically. Coming out of COVID, that spread went up over 3 points, which kind of threw everything out of whack. But recently, the spread's been narrowing back toward more normal levels. And candidly, is one of the reasons that I'm hopeful mortgage rates will come down a little bit in 2026. We're narrowing that spread, getting back to normal levels. So don't pay any attention to what the Fed's doing unless they go completely crazy. And that's entirely possible when we get a new Fed chair in the spring. Um, but what I always tell investors and lenders is I focus on three things in a local market that are economic based. And if you really want to boil it down to one thing, I watch for jobs. I watch for job growth, job creation, or job loss. But the three, my holy trinity, if you will, is job growth, population growth, and wage growth. If you're seeing trends in your local markets that are positive in all three of those, you're going to have a good housing market. And that'll be true whether you're dealing with rental properties and you have a DSCR loan that you're trying to get funded, or whether it's an owner-occupied property or fix and flip opportunity. But more people moving in, more jobs being created, and wage growth going up, You have those three things in a positive territory, you're probably looking at a pretty good market.
Okay, well, and so, and that's a great point because, I talk about this all the time casually with, friends and colleagues, but, we talk about the local market. Um, how do we manage or get good information about jobs data in our local markets? Because, I see the national numbers get posted pretty regularly, usually every month, except for
Mhm.
last year we had
Usually,
one
yes.
that was skipped. But we have that nationally, but from a local perspective, like you said before, we could be seeing something that's positive in Nevada but negative in California because we have this population shift from California to places like Nevada and
Mhm.
Texas and whatnot. So is there a source, either like our government sources or local agencies or associations that manage this or report on it?
Yeah, it varies. The government sites can be somewhat useful, but they're a little bit harder to navigate. But the two go-to sources for what we're talking about, excuse me, in terms of population and jobs and wages, would be the U.S. Census Bureau website and the Bureau of Labor Statistics website. And the BLS website in particular will let you do a dive down into the metro level. So you can get state, you can get metro level. But I hate to keep giving Google business, but go do a Google search for your state or your metropolitan area economic trends, and you'll be surprised what you find. Um, I hate to go old school on everybody, but a lot of markets have a local business journal, a publication that is a surprisingly robust resource for this kind of information. Did you know there was a chip manufacturing plant coming online in Columbus, Ohio? Well, I guarantee you the local business journal was writing about that because they knew about the land acquisition, they knew about the contracts that were being signed, and they reported on that. So you do have to be kind of a consumer of local market information. As I mentioned, there are some of those national resources, BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics, and U.S. Census Bureau, but most states actually have some sort of economic development office that is publishing this data on a somewhat regular basis. I recently had a reporter ask me for information on Iowa. I had to go up and do a Google search on what was going on there. But you find interesting things like in Iowa, for example, the unemployment rate in the state is almost a full point lower than it is nationally. So much more job security if you happen to be in Iowa than if you're in California, where the unemployment rate's a point higher than it is nationally. And then you can even dig down into local markets to see what's different there. So it does require a little bit of work, but you and I both know that the more educated, the more informed you are about those market trends, the more knowledge you can share with your clients and customers, and the more you can help them make educated choices in terms of what makes sense or doesn't make sense in terms of their financial and investment strategies.
No, and I agree 100%. I say this all the time, but people don't care what you know until they know how much you care. But if you're willing to share what you
Yeah.
have and you can speak to it in an intelligent, informed way, without sounding like a pointy head professor type, it really goes a long way with winning people's trust and respect. And
Well,
that's really what a
Jerry,
lot of
you
the
just
book
said
is
something
about.
really important too on the sharing front. Um, just taking some of this publicly available information that we're talking about, putting it into a social media post, putting it into an
Excellent.
email that you can blast out to your database, your sphere of influence, as the marketing folks say, um, positions you as a local market expert, but also keeps you top of mind because I guarantee you your client base is interested in the same information you're interested in and is kind of curious about what's happening in their market. They may be a fix and flip investor who's just waiting for a sign that it's safe to get back into the water again. The sharks are all gone. So, you being the one to provide that useful information gives you a leg up on your competitors, and gives your contact database a reason to remember you, a reason to stay in touch with you, and you're staying top of mind for when they're ready to move.
No, excellent point. I was thinking about some while you're speaking years ago when I I relocated my family from Southern California to Kansas City. Uh, I contacted the Chamber of Commerce. We didn't have internet back
Mhm.
then. And I contacted the Chamber of Commerce, and they sent me a whole packet
Yep.
of information about the housing market, the schools, for lots of different areas within the city. And this was the Kansas City Chamber of Commerce that did that. I was amazed at how low the home prices were compared to
Yep.
California back then. And that was one of the reasons why we
It's even
moved.
more today, Jerry, trust me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I got family in both places, and it's amazing how much house you get for the dollar. Where my daughter lives, where she just bought a house a few years back, and in Mammoth, a house that costs a fraction of what a condominium in Del Mar, California would cost today. So it is amazing. But do you think that local association like that, like chambers of commerce, are still valid places to get good information from?
Yeah, not every town has a chamber of commerce
Right.
or a chamber of commerce that provides that much information. The good chambers do, and there's still a lot of them around. So yeah, that's absolutely somewhere you should be looking. For those people who are with us today that also have relationships with local real estate agents, or for realtors who are on the call with us today, the local multiple listing service, the multiple MLS, is also an excellent resource for getting a lot of the kind of information we're talking about. If you want to really get a deep dive on what's going on with home prices and home sales and days on market and the new listings coming to market and so forth and so on. Those local multiple listing service organizations have a ton of data, but you have to be a member to get to that data. But most realtors are members of their local MLS, and be willing to kind of swap information with them and partner with them to get more of your share of the local business.
Another thing to talk about when we take that realtor to lunch.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Well, this is all fantastic stuff. I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm not going to take any more of it. I know you're a busy guy, but really, we have some really great brokers out there and some fairly large ones. A lot of small guys and independent shops too, but your company does some really cool stuff and great analysis, and the way that you present it is something that is just something I enjoy, because I don't have to be um, a total super nerd to understand it the way you explain it. And so can you tell us a little bit about your company and what you guys do, and because I find it super interesting.
I appreciate that, Jerry, and don't think you're special. The only reason I'm as easy to understand as I am is because that's the only way I understand it. Um, my father drilled into me when I was a young boy that using big fancy words in front of an audience really doesn't impress anybody. It just annoys them. So, um, yeah, CJ Patrick Company is a market intelligence firm. We tend to work with companies in the real estate and mortgage industries. We do provide kind of custom research for companies, which not everybody really needs. But we also do a lot of presentations like I've been doing for AD over the last few years. And I do those specifically for companies. We can come in and talk about what's going on in the national economy, the housing market, state and regional trends, and provide that kind of educational information that companies use either to keep their teams up to date or to use for market planning. And we do kind of customized work too. We do a quarterly survey on real estate investor sentiment. I publish a quarterly report with a company called Batch Data on investor purchase and sales activity across the country. One just came out recently. Um, I do foreclosure reports for companies that are interested in that kind of information. So any company that's looking for market information that they can use to help figure out their business strategies or make sure that their management, their marketing and sales teams are really educated and up to speed on what's going on in the industry, in the economy. Those are the kind of pieces that we typically do on a regular basis.
Fantastic. Okay, so CJ Patrick and Company, um, guys, give them a shout out. And I'll let you go for now, Rick. Thanks again. I can't wait till we get to meet up, once again and talk about the economy and hear what you have to share with us. Looking forward to it. In the meantime, I'm excited that we are going to get to see you down here in Fort Lauderdale in the not too distant future. So looking forward to that as well. So have a fantastic day, and thanks again for taking the time and sharing some of your uh, infinite amounts of knowledge.
Thanks,
So,
Jerry. Nice being here.
Rick never disappoints. I found his suggestions and the focuses on local data eye-opening, since we often get bombarded with national news. Hopefully, this will help you cut through some of the noise and save you some time. What do you think about his suggestions? And do you already use some of these local sources for good info? Maybe you have some ideas we didn't cover. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. We appreciate your support. Have an awesome day, and we'll see you again soon.